make sure all the tech is ready.
We should be underway.
Wonderful. All right. So is it the cue to begin?
Let's welcome everybody and remind you that we are recording today's meeting. If you don't want to appear on camera, you can go ahead and turn your cameras off. Faces encouraged, though, if you do want to play along. We'll begin now. So thank you for coming today.
Yes, thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you for choosing to spend this hour with us on Zoom as we listen and learn from our 2021 writer in residence, Cinelle Barnes. She's here again for another, well, this time for a workshop. Last time she did a reading and Q&A, and today she's going to do a short reading, a workshop, and then have some more Q&A at the end. I'm very excited that she is here to share her wonderful words with us. Before we begin, I want to start in a place of gratitude. First, for the land we live on. PCC is on Tongva land, and we owe their ancestors and their continued living presence here in Pasadena the acknowledgement and respect of their history and lives while we recognize our own violent and troubled history. Next, I want to thank the people who made this possible, the Pasadena Festival of Women Authors, who sponsor our yearly Writer in Residence program. This program has been around for many years and has inspired and touched many budding writers in our creative writing classes, as well as other composition and literature classes. We would like to specifically thank Amy Ulmer, our liaison, for being our guide through the process this tumultuous year, as we moved from in-person to online. We would like to thank the English division and Dean Tuk Tongtaraj, sorry, I say her name so well. Okay, Dean Tuk Tongtaraj in her effortless support of this program, and also Anna Davis and Lucky Springfield for their tireless help. We would like to thank Ken Simon in the library for creating an amazing library guides and archive of this program. I do suggest checking it out because we have all of the writers in residence listed and all their information. So also Dr. Kirsten Ogden for leadership as a creative writing department chair. Finally, I personally want to thank Professor Simona Supakar and Professor Brian Adler for their behind the scenes guidance and tech support so that all of this runs smoothly. Without further ado, let us welcome Cinelle Barnes. Cinelle Barnes is a memoirist, essayist, and educator from Manila, Philippines. She is the author of the harrowing and beautiful book, Monsoon Mansion. This book was listed as the best nonfiction book of 2018 by Bustle and nominated for the 2018 Reading Women Nonfiction Award. She also wrote the book of essays, Malaya, Essays on Freedom. Just recently, she also edited the book of essays, A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South, which is the New York Times new and noteworthy book. She is visiting us from Charleston, South Carolina, where she lives. Hello, Cinelle. You can take it away.
Hi again, Emily. Thank you so much again for inviting me to be here and to be the writer in residence this year. And I'm happy to be able to read to you all again this evening or this afternoon your time. And actually following Emily's introduction, I am in Charleston, South Carolina, which is Cusco land, very close to PD, Catawba, and Cherokee land. And I just wanted to acknowledge that. And I'm reading from my second book, Malaya, Essays on Freedom, which is my second book. And I'll be reading from one of my first published pieces, actually, called Why I Write Memoir, which was heavily edited for the book, but I'll read that version. If you find it online, it's going to be completely different, and that's okay. Why I write memoir. I write because I am the last to remember. I write because my mother lives between personas. She has a condition that she's never sought professional help for, but has been explained by my therapist as dissociative personality disorder. Some days my mother knows that she has a daughter and a granddaughter, and I get a text message. What's up? How's the girl? Other days she forgets that I am now married with a child and will reply to my Merry Christmas from us three with, don't forget to moisturize, use pads, not tampons, wear a training bra. I don't know where or how she lives. I don't think she does either. Her microamnesias make her days seem like years and her years like days. She forgets to brush her teeth, and she forgets that she almost died in front of me at least 3 times. I write because my father had a stroke in April of 2016. Because of it, he experiences cognitive lapses. His diabetes mimics symptoms of Alzheimer's and dementia. He attempts to unlock cars that aren't his, misses medical appointments, scrambles for house keys he's been clutching in his fist all along, and emails the same questions he already asked over voicemail. How do I copy and paste documents? How do I attach cover letters? My papa hasn't worked in 7 years. I write because my brother dilutes recollections of broken champagne glasses, knives, and dead babies with vodka, tequila, and beer. He pulverized them along with the pills he crushed to dust and snorted. He has worked as a club DJ for 16 years, spinning vinyl for a crowd, from 9 in the evening until 3 in the morning, and sleeping during the day to evade sunshine and conversation. I write because even the house we lived in no longer serves us in the business of remembering. It has long been demolished, and where it once was, Mini Mall now stands. I am as physical as these remembrances get. My mother, father, and brother lead lives of forgetting, while I have made a living out of remembering. My email signature reads, Cinelle Barnes, memoirist and essayist. I think I'll stop there. But I think that's a really fitting request, actually, from the faculty to read that tonight, because as you'll see as I'm about to share my screen, hopefully successfully. There we go. Yes, okay. Oh, you disappeared. There we go. Found you again. Tonight I'll be guiding all of you through a short workshop before a quick Q&A on writing family stories. If you've Googled me or you've read anything by me, then you know that I tend to write about family a whole lot. Probably 98% of the time I'm writing about family. The only other topic I might write about are natural disasters and climate change, and still somehow that ends up in my essaying circling back to the topic of family, chosen and not. But I call this workshop Mine, Yours, Ours, because that's a question that tends to come up a lot when I teach memoir or essay. People always ask, which stories are mine and which aren't, which stories are mine to tell and which aren't. And when I was first asked that question, that's actually what led me to write this essay that I just read to you, Why I Write Memoir. And it's in that why that I find answers over and over again to questions like, but can I tell this story? Or why would I tell this story? How should I tell this story? And the why there, the why I write memoir really is the answer to all that. So I highly recommend that you write your own version of that essay, Why I Write blank, whatever it is you're writing. But let's get started. This is a condensed version of this workshop as well. And so we'll focus more on the who of family stories and the when of family stories. If we dabbled with a where, we might be here for 4 more hours, and I won't do that to you. But the who and family memoir, or family stories if you're writing fiction. I like to think of my stories in three ways: through character, through relationships between these characters, and then the scenes that they participate in or find themselves in throughout the story. When I also teach memoir, often I teach it to writers who might be interested in writing or feel compelled to write stories of trauma or loss or grief. I tend to frame these classes around these three things that are based on narrative therapy, which is partly also my background. And those three things are attunement, containment, and repair. And whatever story I'm writing, I try to show these three elements or the rupture in them. And attunement basically is any kind of communication, verbal and not. And it's characters or family members showing acceptance of or celebration of another's identification or motivation and actions and reactions. Containment, the second element, is when family members or members of any unit of human beings, really, or animals, if that's the kind of story you're writing, members of this unit making room and holding space for all that a person is and all that a person can and cannot hold in their fragile little bodies, emotions, ideas, the ego and the essence, aspirations and desires, fears and joys change, and all the things that also remain consistent, or what I like to call what survives about us. The third element is repair. And this is simply when ruptures are fixed, or when healing is pursued, or affirmation, or regeneration, reimagination, renewal, evolution, all those synonyms. And I teach it in this way because most stories of healing and trauma are relational. And so if you're going to write a family story, you really have to focus on relationship dynamics. Of course, before you can tackle relationship dynamics or family dynamics, you're going to need to know who your characters are and know them in a way that is storytelling, right? Like who your characters are in real life is going to be different from who your characters are in the narrative, because in the narrative, the focus is story. And whatever you say, nonfiction is in some way still self-fictionalization, right? It's craft, and that's a great thing. But back to character. Your characters are not just going to be people that you'll describe for who they are. You won't just describe them for their sense of being, but for their sense of becoming. They're developing over time. They're growing into something. They're evolving or devolving, or both, over time. Each of your characters will have a select number of traits. If you're writing nonfiction and writing about a real person, you're likely not going to write everything about them. Instead, you'll select traits, possibly contradictory traits that create a push and pull, a tension, friction that will eventually lead them to make a choice. Characters almost always have conflicting personalities and desires. And even when, especially in families, even when we want the same things, like love or joy or peace or healing or just a life that's sustainable or stability or whatever it is that the characters want, the family members want. Often we want the same thing, but we pursue them in different ways, or we want them in different ways. A good example of this is The Vanishing Half, which is actually a novel by Britt Bennett. And put simply, that story is about two sisters who have identical trauma, who look identical, and who come from the same small town in Louisiana, and they evolve and really devolve from the same traumatic incident. And all they want is safety and all they want is belonging, but they pursue these things very differently. That if you were to draw the arc of this family story, it's actually in the shape of a Y. Two characters, two sisters coming from the same point and then diverging from that same want because of the way they pursue this want or this need. Your characters will also have, like I said, desires, but it's the narrator's desire that will be communicated the loudest in personal narrative. Interactions as well between characters will reflect these desires. And these desires, there are three things that can happen to them throughout the narrative. And that's either these desires are thwarted, or they're fulfilled, or they're only partially realized. Sometimes desires even change along with the character. So think of that when you're thinking of family members that you might be writing about. I'm always thinking about how my parents just wanted the best for us, but their definition for best greatly differed from each other's and from what we thought that word meant. And for one of them, the desire for the best life, a good life, was completely thwarted. For another, it was partially realized. And for my brother and I, it was fulfilled for each of us, but in very different ways. Lastly, your characters will show a sense of becoming and belonging or not belonging. And something that I always emphasize when I am editing a memoir or an essay, a personal narrative, is don't just tell me what you survived, even though event is paramount and even though inciting incidents are paramount. Tell us what part of you as a character survives. What did this event fail at diminishing or extinguishing? For my brother and I, it was for him, his love of music and his just innate talent to create sound. And it was almost like he would pluck notes from the air, and that continued to grow. That love, that passion, that gift continued to grow despite everything that happened to us. And for me, it was literature, and it's my playfulness and it's my strong spirit. So don't just tell me what you survived, tell me what part of you survives, and maybe what continues to threaten it as well. I'll actually skip over that last bit. You're probably wondering, what if I don't have all the information? Well, you put on your journalist hat and you interview family members. If it's safe for you, physically, emotionally, and mentally, relationally, maybe even legally, those boundaries that you need to set. If those are in place, I highly recommend playing journalist. When I interviewed my family members, each one of them agreed, except for one person who I didn't even approach because I knew that wasn't going to happen. You can probably guess who it was because she was just probably going to lie throughout her entire interview. But some family members wanted to be interviewed in person. Some family members wanted to be interviewed by email, some by phone. Some needed a translator, which I helped provide. Some wanted a mediator, which I also helped provide. But when I did this part of the development of Monsoon Mansion, I put on my journalist hat, even put on my journalist lanyard, my press pass, and went to the in-person interviews with a steno notebook and a digital recorder. And I didn't have an iPhone at this time. Digital recorder, I was hooked up to my laptop, and they forgot. It was like they forgot that I was their sister, their child, their niece, their cousin. But Here's something that I teach when I used to work at an NGO, and I would dispatch photojournalists and journalists to disaster areas. After, say, a hurricane or an earthquake, I'd have to quickly train these freelancers, and I would tell them, you're not going to have time, and these people that you're about to interview, they're coming out of intense trauma. So, and I'll give them all these tips, walking instead of sitting down, looking out into the horizon together instead of at each other, all these journalism interview tricks that you learn. And then I would tell them, ask them open-ended questions, let them tell their story instead of asking them yes and no, or what is blank questions. Ask open-ended questions, ask about abstract things like, what does it mean for you to go home? What does it mean for you to heal? What does it mean for you to forgive? How would life change if blank happened or didn't happen? If you could tell someone one thing, what would you say? I would ask them all the same question, the same central question. Everyone got asked the same question. And then I would see, after interviewing, I would see how different their answers all were, but also how some of them overlapped. But it's so much better to interview family members in this way. It's so much more natural, and it gets to the heart of things, and the details that matter come forth faster. And you get to really test out this theory that for the most part, we all want the same thing. We just want them differently, or we would rather pursue them differently, or we understand the world differently. Yeah, if you want homework, this is your homework tonight. Think of that central question. What is that question that you're dying to ask members of this unit that you're writing about? With that, here's our first exercise. If you don't have a pen and paper yet, I'll give you a minute to grab some. Okay, and here's what we're going to do. We're actually not going to read aloud. Oh, actually, why not? Let's do a read aloud. I know it's the afternoon and it's mid-semester, and anything I can do to help wake you up, I'll do. But I do this exercise with all students that I have, all workshop groups I lead, because it's just a great part of writing practice. On Tuesday night, Professor Fernandez asked me about authentic voice, and this is really a part of my answer. How I found my authentic voice really came down to what or who made up my awareness. And to me, awareness is a question of audience, and voice is also a question of who you imagine yourself talking to when you're writing. And so let's go ahead and do a little read aloud. Feel free to, it always gets chaotic on Zoom, so I won't tell you to unmute yourselves, because then it's just gonna like sputter out and then the internet will break because of us. But if you, like speaking of family, many of my family members are colorblind, we'll be reading text that is in pink font. And if you can't determine that, I have these two parallel lines over here, and that will be the text that we'll be reading. And I'll cue us, and you just read along. If you appeal to everyone, you will matter to no one. Whoever makes up your ideal audience affects what you write, how you write it, and why you write it. So be selective. Now, get your pen and paper out and make a list of no more than 6 people. and I'll give you 3 minutes, since this is a shorter class. Who are you writing to? One more minute. Okay. Here's the twist. Look at your list and see if you're one of 6 people on that list. So I have, and I have to do this every single time I sit down to write because I forget every single time. So every single time before I write anything or after I've written something, I sit down and make a list again of no more than 6 people. And remember that the work of memoir or personal narrative is not merely storytelling, but one of reclaiming story. Otherwise, why else would anyone write about their families, right? It's such a tall order, it's such a difficult task. I forget who is the correct person to give attribution to for this quote, but I know that a memoirist once said, if you've survived a childhood, you have more than plenty to write about. And I think that's so true. It's hard sometimes when people are aware of my story and they say, but we didn't grow up in like a crumbling mansion, or we didn't have like this lush backdrop to our childhood, or we didn't have these like crazy genius, also really delicate parents. And I'm like, no, but we're all, family alone is enough to, that's enough fodder, or just having grown up, having survived the childhood is always enough fodder. And your child self is worth writing about, and writing to as well. But that said, I love this quote from Sven Burkert from The Art of Time and Memoir, which I read from on Tuesday night. It says, the memoirist's eye must be an inhabited character, a voice that takes possession of its account. In memoirs where event and situation are paramount, the narrator achieves identity through decisions of self-presentation, what to reveal and from what vantage point and tone, catching hold of the fugitive self. Here's another one from the same book and author. The long chronicling of her girlhood wasn't just a recording of events and stages, but a going toward, a deliberate mapping of a self evolving, there's that word again, from simpler to more complex levels of awareness. you heard me mention earlier, a sense of becoming. Another homework here is try writing to your child's self, invite them into the process and have them walk you through the place you are writing about. Walk them through the place and time you're writing from now. That was really helpful for me in writing essays about writing a memoir, because it helped me see my two selves, then and now, and then the many selves in between, and the many thens. Okay, we're gonna skip right to the when. Memoir, especially family memoir, has at least 4 parts: the now, the then, and the many thens. Those many thens are, the many thens and the even more thens. But the now is really you, the narrator, and why you're writing this now. Not just about a when and where, but why. Why are you writing this now? What could you lose now, or what could you gain if you told this story now? Often that's also really helpful in just framing story, or kind of adding a hook to the beginning of a family saga, a family story. That idea came to me when I actually read The Glass Castle for the first time. And the opening scene for that book, for that memoir, is, this publishing executive, this high-profile journalist, takes the elevator down from her high-rise apartment in Manhattan and gets in her car service. Car service makes a turn, and who does she see scavenging through a dumpster? Her mom and dad. And so we immediately see these contrasts in who they are, and the contrast of then and now, and where she's writing from and why she's writing it right now. And then there's the central event that caused everything or everyone to change. You can focus on what was being threatened then, or if the family didn't change visibly, how did they react instead? If they did change, how did that transpire? How did they display that? What is a central secret maybe that is revealed over time? And we'll come back to that in just a little bit when I give you more time to write. Then there's the many thens. Family stories, of course, won't be family stories without special days like birthdays, weddings, baptisms, graduations, leaving for college, or vacations. That provides high contrast to the more mundane things that are really the stuff of life and the stuff of family. It's stuff that fills calendars. It's the stuff that you tell Alexa to remind you to do, like flea medication for your pets, and who forgets and who ignores the reminder. That's the kind of stuff that really shows who family members are. Just look at any one calendar. This is why I won't ever migrate to an iCal or a Google Calendar, because I think I owe it to my future writer self to have these very analog planners where you see different handwriting and different abbreviations that became code for our family over time. But those two, these codes, all families have their own codes. What is the code of your family, and how did this show up in that meaty part of life, which is TV time, lunch, dinner, Sunday supper, work, school, bedtime, homework time, etc. Okay, it's 5:35, so I want to give everyone time to do this. When writing a new essay, or writing a new book, I'm an outliner. I'm Cinelle Barnes and I outline, but I'm one of those people, very technical. I like to be really structured so that I can make a mess and be really creative and play later talking about, having a family story set in a piece of architecture, grand architecture. I like to have scaffolding in place so that I can take down scaffolding later on. But anyways, here's what we're going to do. I want you, we're going to draw, and I teach drawing and writing classes because as many people don't realize that Flannery O'Connor was actually a visual artist first. Flannery O'Connor went to school for visual art and started out first drawing cartoons and illustrations. And as her repertoire expanded, she kept drawing, and she said that's because drawing helps us to really see. It would help her see the thoughts in her mind and the images in her mind. And so I like to be really visual in my drafting. But this is what you're going to somewhat do. Yours will be completely different. You will draw a box or really whatever shape suits you. And in the middle, you will write that moment of change, that event, that inciting incident from which everyone in that unit evolves or devolves. For my family, it was compounding events, my baby brother's death and the Gulf War. And really, there's a third one, which is a monsoon. And that really starts the family's fall from grace. Around this box, around these events, are family members depicted as arrows, and each arrow looks different, and that is representative. Each one is representative of what happened and how they reacted and how they continued to move on. So you'll see here, that's my little brother who passed away, and so that's a stunted line. Then there's my older brother, who, to me, this dotted line represents the fact that he came and went physically, emotionally, and mentally. And if he could be invisible, I think he would have chosen to be invisible. And yet his presence was so strong and so influential in my life that there were still little markers of him throughout. Here is my papa. I've heard that the chapter about him leaving, which I also allude to in the Gulf War essay. I've heard that readers have been the most shocked about his departure, that was the moment that they felt like their expectations were undercut or undermined, in a good way, in a good storytelling way, not good for me, but narratively. But my papa was the most charismatic and loving guy, and in the end, he was someone that was out of there, as fast as he could, caught up in this illusions of grandeur and being able to save his empire. That's why I drew him as this squiggly Sharpie line that was quickly, scribbled, and there's an energy to it, there's an insistence to it, there's an urgency to it. And that to me, it was representative of who he was in the story. And then here is my mama, where she's a slightly more bolder line than this one. And you see this, remember earlier, the contradictions. There she was trying to save the life she built, trying to save the house that she lived in at all costs. Some were sinister and illegal than others. And at the same time, also had the opportunity to leave. But what she did was every time we had an opportunity to go, she would come right back, and she would come right back, and she would come right back. And over time, that U-turn would get intensified, and my resentment about it would as well. And there's a constant betrayal between the two of us, back and forth, who's betraying whom. That happens throughout the story. Of course, here's my line as narrator, and you will do that for yourself as well. You will draw yourself as the boldest, biggest line, because your perspective as narrator is what will make it artful and what will make it memoir. And your perspective is really what will give the story texture. Everyone can write this story. Everyone in your family can write their own version. This is your version. And so you be that biggest, baddest line. But here I kind of drew me as an arrow that has this little loop-de-loop. That's because as strong as a gravitational pull was to the outside world, the world outside of the mansion, the pull toward my mother was just as strong, because what's a little girl to do? But that there is me, you turning back with my mother, maybe once, maybe twice, and eventually leaving. But tell me the varying lengths and shapes and intensities of your family story, at least with regard to one particular event when life as you knew it ended. Okay, so draw a box in the middle of the page and name an event after which things changed for the family or for the unit. And then draw multiple arrows on each side of the box, and each arrow will represent a different member of the family. And I'll give you 5 minutes. If you want to take it up a notch, I've had students use different colors to represent each family member. And only you would know what those colors mean. But those colors are something you can use when you set up scene or setting later on. And you can also draw from those colors, kind of their attitude or their energy. Okay. Of course, this is something you can keep working on at home or in class. How exciting for your professors that they get to see what comes out of this. I always feel like, I don't get to read, but yeah, so exciting for them. It's the 47th minute of the hour, and so I want to open it up or give Emily the chance, Professor Fernandez, the chance to open it up for questions about anything we just talked about.
Hello, everyone. This is really thoughtful. I was just actually typing in the chat. Something that I ended up writing from this assignment was when blank happens, who leaves, who stays, who forgets, who digs in, who drowns themselves. So it really did help me to like kind of see, I was thinking of a specific thing in my family, but yeah, it really did bring that about just doing this assignment. So thank you.
Yeah, welcome. If you look at screenplays when screenplays around family or about family, usually there'll be this montage like at the end when everyone's really now like spiraling out, right? And it'll be like 1 second instances of each character, each family member playing out the way they're digesting this one thing, right? One of my favorite scenes that reminds me of that is from Ozark. Any of you have seen it? It's a Netflix show. But it's just an everyday family who suddenly becomes really sinister and notorious. But you see how they each, and I thought of it because you said, and who drowns. There's a very, very vivid lake scene in my head from that show.
Cool. So this is the time for questions. I'm not seeing any questions, but I'm opening it up if somebody wants to ask a question. I just want to remind you that she has written a lot about her trauma, and so be mindful of the kind of a triggering question that might trigger not only her, but other listeners. So try to be mindful of that. And I'm looking for any questions. Did Simona or Brian have any questions? Or Anna? Or anybody else?
I have one.
Sure, great.
That's okay. Not about personal experience, but this exercise was great for structure for me. I always find it hard to where to start. So this is beautiful. Thank you. And I'm wondering where you go from here. You've got this core structure, the event, and then 4 characters essentially. Do you outline from here, or do you just write a little bit about each character and then see where it goes in a more organic way?
Well, I typically always start with image. And so the point of this exercise for me personally is after I've kind of seen the bigger picture, come back to that image that comes back to me, like driftwood. And I start with that. Like I know that if it's indelible in my mind, it will be in the readers because I'm highly distractible and talk too much. But I know that if it's indelible in my mind, it will be to a reader. And so I start there. And sometimes that image is after the fact. Sometimes that image is the fact. And sometimes it's just right before. It's almost like that moment in what sculptors try to capture in their works. It's not so much just staring, like someone staring this way, but someone about to do something. Sometimes that's often the image to me is I'm about to do something or something just happened. And I'm left there hanging in this feeling. And then the imagery gives way to thought and feeling, which I often convey through through setting. And then that's when I really try to build the world, whether that world is this crumbling mansion somewhere in the Pacific, or that world is our little kitchen here in South Carolina. And I really try to then set up like a sense of time, sense of place, and then a sense of attitude. And when I know the attitude of something, then I know what kinds of words I will use throughout. So talking about texture, I'll even go as far as, okay, the world I'm trying to build, I want it to be really soft in its contours, and I want the reader to see bright lights, and I want the reader to also feel cold. So I'll focus on those descriptors, and then I'll drop immediately into scene, where you immediately talk about relationships, where you just feel tension immediately between two characters, or at least two characters. I think I sent it to the group maybe, but I have an essay from December, which came out of this exercise. And our family of three is coming out of, it was the beginning of lockdown. Oh gosh, that was more than a year ago. Okay, beginning of lockdown. And we had just moved into our house, so we knew no one in this neighborhood. It was locked down, and we fell victim to a cybercrime that eventually led to even our coronavirus, like stimulus checks getting stolen, someone, filing our taxes on our behalf, and then basically everything is pulled from under us as the world is coming down to its knees. So I wanted the feeling of like things just kind of like caving in and collapsing, but the tone, the attitude I wanted to really convey was joy. And so the first true scene is me and my daughter playing, and the first sound you hear is one of my many voices, because I do a lot of voices with her. And so it just think it's about the five senses, right? It's like sight, sound, touch, taste, smell. So I really start to build from there, and then build intensity from there. And the point of contention in the very beginning is between me and my husband, and he and I are very much alike. There's rarely tension, but when there is, we really feel it. And so I wanted to show that I described him reduced to a crumple in a metal chair, is how I described it, which is really what happened. He was like origami folding into himself in a metal chair, which was cold. But yeah, so I know that's such a long answer.
Thank you. That was good. Thank you.
Welcome.
I have a question, Cinelle. As I mentioned, I also teach creative nonfiction, and we are going to be writing a memoir essay soon. And I think probably the most common question I get from students is how to approach writing about people ethically that you know, right? So just this week, actually, a student emailed me and said, I want to stop saying a friend in my essay. Can I give the friend a name, or should I not name them? So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about how to characterize people in your work in a way that feels good to you as a writer.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's a really good question to ask, because it actually asks so many questions, right? There's the legal part, which if you publish a book through a mid to large size publisher, they will run a legal read. So be aware of that. You need to be able to corroborate your claims, and you need to be able to say that you can prove something and that no one's going to come after you. And if they do, they'll come after you, not the publisher or the magazine or whatever it is. And you'll sign off on that. There are ways around it too. You can, if you can prove it, and there's no question there. If you think people will be pugnacious or belligerent, then you can change their names. I changed everyone's names. I don't think I've ever really used anyone's real names. My brother did not want to be written about when the book was already in copy edits, but he was actually the most engaged throughout development. And he suddenly had a change of mind. And at that point, I was like, no, you already signed off on it. And, you make music still, write a song about me, write the nastiest song about me, or not, because I didn't write anything nasty about you. And he was so afraid that I was going to put him in terrible light. But what he didn't realize was that I saw him in a way he never saw himself. I saw him through very loving eyes because he only had love for me ever. But maybe one gift of the pandemic is that in lockdown, he actually had time to read. And he, 3 years later, read the book and messaged me on WhatsApp and said, I never saw myself this way, and you just helped me see myself in better light, with kind eyes. So don't not expect that either. For my mother, I'm estranged from her, and I also have legal protections against her or anything she might do. And so I felt good writing about her. Trying to think who else. There's an essay that I've been writing just in my notebook, not in my computer, because I feel, and it's about a friend, my best friend actually, who's very ill, who's terminally ill. And I've been documenting twists and turns in our friendship and in our group of then 5, now 4, since she got sick. But I know that that's not something I can write without her permission. And that's not something I want to show her as she's currently fighting illness. And I've also constantly asked myself, some things you write just for yourself, and is this one of those things? Or one day, is this going to be a tribute piece? I know that Grace Talusan, who's also a Filipino nonfiction writer, she will actually write with kind of an end, like an end setting for her essays in mind. If it's about family, she will likely publish it only in print because she knows family will never buy print, or some really obscure journal or hard to find journal. That's where she'll choose to submit it. And then if it's safe from any of that, she'll publish it online. I think you also know, like we all know that nonfiction is craft, but a lie is a lie, and anyone knows that. I have composite characters in my book, mainly because I didn't think that these evil people needed more space anywhere on the page or in my life. So I folded them into one and didn't think they deserved any more mention. I don't think that perpetrators deserve mention. And so I didn't. And I wanted to give more word count to people that they hurt. And that to me was ethical. What else? Yeah, it's craft, right? It's you might rearrange things, you you will use the elements of fiction and just storytelling and even poetry, but you will tell the emotional truth of something, and you'll know when it's not that.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I always think of one of my favorite writers, Susan Straight. She always writes with such a motherly tone, and in the way she treats characters that might be real, and that envelopment, that seeing them like unconditionally helps to kind of frame them. So anyways, I just remember you saying something like that, and your story about your brother was really touching. So with that, we are going to do a wrap up. And I just want to say thank you one more time, and I'm going to hand it over to Brian Adler, and he will do the final wrap up and final thanks. It was really wonderful having you.
Thank you so much. I had such a great time this week. Thank you so much.
So thank you. Thank you goes out to everyone who's able to make our little Zoom here. Those people live stream viewing right now. But thank you to Cinelle Barnes. Thank you for coming and giving the reading on Tuesday. The workshop today, you gave an interview to Inscape, our literary magazine. You worked with our students. We appreciate your writing. We thank you for spending your time and sharing your work with us. So thank you. Thank you in large amounts for being our 2021 writer in residence. We thank you in the silent Zoom clapping and appreciation emojis that are going on right now. And one final thanks goes out to the Pasadena Festival of Women Authors, who makes this all possible. I'm not getting their website on there it is. Thank you goes to the Pasadena Festival of Women Authors, who provide funding for our programs. It looks like their events back on. They're a wonderful organization. They help make this possible, and we want to thank them. It's the Pasadena Festival of Women Authors. Thanks everybody who was involved, and thank you in large amounts, Cinelle Barnes. I truly appreciated this. Hopefully we can get you back yet again and share even more with us. So thank you so much. Thank you, everybody.